Well, they're calling P. Diddy eminently trustworthy. Yes, and that he should be released on a $50 million bond as part of his bail hearing. Eminently trustworthy. Well, we'll see about that. But there are a lot of questions still in this indictment. Are there bigger fish to fry here? There's a lot of holes, a lot of unanswered questions. Someone who's been digging into this very deeply for many, many months is Ian Carroll. Of course, you can follow him on X, on TikTok, and he's been doing an amazing job and amazing journalism digging into this, to all of this and how deeply this goes. So we invited Ian to come on the show and dive a little bit more deeply into all of this. Ian, great to see you today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Clayton. Great to be back, man.
So I just want to go through pieces of this indictment because Natali did a great job yesterday deep diving, going through all the pieces of the indictment. But there's a lot. I mean, the indictment describes a pattern of abuse and coercion in all of this, but the full extent of this criminal organization and these alleged activities, we don't know. Who else might be involved in this is still not fully clear. So that's my side of it. What did you make of what's left out of this indictment?
I mean, the glaring hole is that the indictment goes after sort of the bottom of what we learned from the Lil Rod lawsuit. It goes after the guns and the drugs and a lot of the violence on Diddy's level. But notably missing is the name Lucian Grange, the CEO of Universal Music Group. He was named originally in Lil Rod's lawsuit with alleged clear evidence of him knowing about the parties and funding the parties, but later on, through mechanisms of power, he got his name removed from that lawsuit, is my understanding, and now he does not show up in the indictment against Diddy, and that's kind of to be expected because often they'll go after the smaller fish first. But that's the biggest hole in the story because that starts to cut the legs off of going upwards above Diddy.
So in that way, then, do you think I said this yesterday on the show that I feel like he might be the scapegoat here, and that the goal is to try to stop it with him. Nothing more to see here. Don't go any higher. Don't look at how dirty and deeply this goes. Is that your sense of it?
That's the worry. And I think that right now there's prevailing sentiments on the internet, and the pessimistic sentiment is they're going to cover up all of the connections and not go after the bigger fish and use Diddy as a scapegoat. And that seems likely based on past history. But there is a large optimistic sentiment that they are going after him now, and they have arrested him, and he may be talking. They denied him bail, allegedly. And so there are people that believe that they're going to get him to talk and to start to add other indictments, add other charges, and start to arrest other people. Time will tell. I'm sure hoping that they go after more and that this is just the start. But it's really hard to say at this point if we have a new justice system or any actual justice in this case, or whether it's just another Epstein 2.0.
Yesterday on the show, we talked about Fahim Muhammad and this very odd purchasing of property at the southern border, right along the southern border wall, right next to Tijuana in the town of Boulevard, which, as we talked about on the show yesterday, no one would buy property at that location unless you're a criminal or you want to be involved in some sort of cartel-related organization to traffic people across the southern border. That piece of it seems glaringly missing right now. What do you make of that?
First of all, anyone who hasn't seen your episode about that from the other day should go watch it. I had speculated a little bit about Fahim Muhammad and that property side of it when I first started investigating, but I didn't find that news clip that you guys found. And that really puts it into clear, obvious, like in your face perspective. Because Fahim Muhammad, if anyone doesn't know, Fahim Muhammad was Michael Jackson's head of security when this guy was like in his early 20s. Straight out of college, which is already a huge red flag. And as soon as Michael Jackson died, he gets promoted to being the head of Diddy's security for this blackmail ring, which means he's overseeing all this criminal activity. So clearly his background is not the business and real estate degrees that he got in college. And him having this other side of his business, which is this property purchasing, he's like gifting acres and acres of property to his 14-year-old son, which just sounds like tax write-offs and money laundering to me. It's on the southern border with the southern border wall there. It's a big enough piece of property that it could easily be used for human trafficking. And I've spoken with other journalists on the ground in the San Diego area that are reaching the exact same conclusions and even going a little deeper. So I'm still tracing those threads. But to me, that speaks to connections to much bigger things in the industry and to a much bigger network, because not only is the real estate, the human trafficking, the minors, all of that's missing from the current indictments, but also any mention of the hidden cameras and the alleged video blackmail operation. That is also missing from the indictments. And those are the two aspects that tie this most directly to an Epstein-style organization. And we all don't live in the blackmail world. We don't live in the black market. So we don't really think of how that industry works. But just like if you worked in the sports industry or you worked in the movie business, you know the other people that work in your industry, you know the other big players. And so often I would assume these big players in the blackmail industry and in the human trafficking industry, they probably know each other, just like arms traffickers know each other, just like drug traffickers know each other. And so Fahim Muhammad is one of the obvious glaring examples of potential ties to the other aspects of the black market that is missing at this point.
It is glaring, right, that this big piece of it is missing, the child trafficking minors piece of this. And they did open it up during the press conference to, hey, we've got a tip line. Any victims out there, we want you to come forward. Do you get the sense that we haven't closed the book on that particular part of the story, that might be the other shoe to drop here, the sex trafficking and the minors? I can only hope, because that, to me, time and time again, we talk about on our show, I don't know what it is about the lack of attention on child trafficking in the United States, but it seems to get just brushed aside, and they're going after him for guns and other things.
Yeah. I mean, they're on the more like rational or skeptical side of things. It is important to note that when you're talking about child trafficking, you're talking about underage victims. It can be notoriously hard to actually get hard evidence that you can prosecute in a court of law, partially because a lot of child trafficking victims are not in control of their own lives, do not survive for very long, are continually in those trafficking networks and don't have the agency to actually know what's going on or to contact authorities and tell their story. They have no one to defend them, so their lives are at risk if they're even still alive to this day. So there's all these elements that go against us getting evidence to prosecute in that kind of an example. But there's also the aspect that the like you're saying, the lack of attention to child trafficking, which is, as you've had JJ Carroll and Ryan Mata on your show many times, and those guys are doing a great job of exposing that this is not a small industry. This is a massive, massive industry in our world today. And everything that I'm seeing about it and learning about it really indicates that it is feeding a need or a marketplace at the highest levels of power. And so it is only to be expected that if the highest rooms of power are using the services of the child trafficking networks for whatever reasons, then it has the highest levels of protection. And so time and again, we see misdirection, we see obfuscation, and we see just abject cover-ups to dismiss child trafficking cases and to push them to the side and not prosecute.
You're absolutely right about that. But what really scares me, I'll be honest with you, is that we know that most of these children end up dead. They are killed. And so to your point about them not being available, not being in the system, I mean, and now this is purely speculation here, but if this thing was as massive as it was and it continued for as many years as it did, and in the indictment we hear about IVs being used because victims were so beat up and hurt that they were kept, hidden from the public for many, many days so they could be given IV drips. How many people is there murder here in the heart of this somewhere? We don't know, pure speculation, but that is where my mind goes when I hear that there's no children that they don't have children in this. Terrifying.
Well, it's important to note for anyone that hasn't read the Lil Rod the Rodney Jones versus Sean Combs lawsuit, that one is probably the one that sort of spurred this current arrest. That one directly alleges that Lil Rod was a witness to a murder that was either Diddy or his son shooting someone in a bathroom, and then police obviously did not investigate and swept it under the rug. So that's murder of like a prominent adult figure that has, a life and a paper trail and would require a cover up, right? That is, and then what you're saying about like abuse and IV fluids and stuff like that, like if you read the Cassie lawsuit that came against Diddy, I think a year ago now, that she talks about being kept in hotel rooms for a week or more at a time to heal from her wounds. And she's a public figure, a celebrity with fans, with like a public image. So these are people that would be much harder to cover up abuse and murder. Whereas a trafficked child has no footprint, no support, no knowledge that they even exist. And so if Diddy, for example, is willing to beat Cassie to the point of needing to hide her in a hotel room for weeks at a time to heal, then you can only imagine what he's willing to do to someone that has no one looking for them and no one coming to save them. So it's only speculation at this point, but we know from other examples of the child trafficking networks and cases that children are killed all the time in these kinds of situations. And I can only fear that is probably involved in this one too, allegedly.
Allegedly, yes. Again, we're speculating here on this, but you're absolutely right about that. When these children have no birth certificates, they're being ferreted across the border by coyotes, no parents at all. They're being used by these elites across the United States the United States is the largest purveyor of sex trafficking of children in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is massively profitable, and these elites will pay good money for it. And when they're used up, then they're tossed out, killed, gone. And there's hundreds of thousands of children who are missing in the United States. I would be stunned to not, I wouldn't be stunned at all, is what I'm saying here. You mentioned Cassie. I'll get you out of here with this, Ian, in a second here with the Cassie lawsuit. So a lot of that, this was settled quickly, right? Very fast. So it remains uncertain how these sort of prior settlements that Diddy has gone through will affect this federal case. She's not talking about it. They were quickly settled. So instead of seeing all of this evidence presented to the public through discovery and other things, it's all sealed. We'll never see it. How much of that do you think will affect this federal case?
Fortunately, there is so much criminality and evidence alleged that, like, the Cassie lawsuit was settled out of court, and so there are certainly NDAs and certainly like aspects of that are now not prosecutable because of the settlement. But there's so much more that I can only imagine that they have a lifetime's worth of cases left to bring against him. And the Lil Rod lawsuit was not settled in any form, as far as I'm aware. And so that combined with the raid on Diddy's properties that happened earlier this year, I'm sure they have lots that they can prosecute him on. They should have all of the tapes and all of the video files if they raided his house and apparently carried out his computers. And so I think that those things are playing into the case in some degree. But if they don't have enough to prosecute Diddy and put him away for life and get him to squeal, then they are clearly not doing their jobs and covering things up, because there is no shortage of crimes to charge Diddy with.
Right. It seems like they had a grab bag of things they could have put on this indictment, and there's things that they perhaps even held back from putting on this indictment because they just had so much. Unbelievable. You can follow Ian's great work, Cancel Coco, on X, as well as all of the other platforms, doing amazing work as always. And we really appreciate you taking some time out to talk with us. I know it's been a crazy week. Thanks so much, Ian.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks for staying on the trail, man. Appreciate it.
Now, we should let you know what Diddy's lawyer says about this, because he's saying that Diddy is totally innocent and that the government actually does not have evidence. So he did an interview with Caitlin Collins on CNN yesterday, and we want to show you this because what he's saying is if this evidence existed, it would have been in the indictment. And he's saying this evidence does not exist. Listen to him saying that.
You're portraying this as adults who were at these events that wanted to be, I shouldn't even call them events. That's not certainly how anyone else would label it, but that they wanted to be there. But they also allege that they were recorded and essentially used as blackmail. Is that not true?
That's not true. That's not true.
How can you prove that when they have electronic evidence that, as they argue, over 90 cell phones, laptops, iCloud storage accounts, 30 electronic and storage devices, hard drives, thumb drives? Yeah. You're not worried about that?
No, because if they had it, they would have put it in the indictment. and it's not in the indictment.
Okay. I mean, I actually thought the same thing, because when the prosecutor walked over to the posters and he said, look at the evidence we had, and it was a big poster full of guns. I thought, okay, there's got to be more than this. Maybe they're just keeping something close to the vest. I don't know. What's the smart way to play this? Do you hold this back? I mean, the lawyer will get to see the case against him. There's no such thing as, like you see in TV, like, oh, surprise, we had this, and the opposition didn't know.
Like during trial, suddenly they present evidence that the defense didn't know about.
That's
like,
not a thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that doesn't happen because they have to be presented with all evidence. Right.
They have to know all evidence against them before they go up. So, okay, we don't know, right? We just don't know. That seems hard to believe, but we don't know.
It wasn't in the indictment, but it is still early days. They may have not presented all of the evidence to them yet. They have a certain amount of time and window to give them all of the evidence.
My hope is that if and when we get this evidence, it's connected to other people, and other people who did this will be held accountable, because that's all I care about is if you hurt people, if you abused people, you be held accountable, and you tell me who else was in it. Now, he also says that...
Sorry, really quick. Do they have to get permission from the people that might be in the videos? Like maybe these people are like, hey, I don't want people knowing that I was part of these.
No, this is not like a sign a release to be in a McDonald's commercial.
They're not making a movie out of it if you're a party to a crime.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to pay you a certain amount for royalties.
If I got caught on security camera murdering somebody, it's like, yeah, but I do not consent to you showing. And they're like, oh, damn it. You almost had him.
Yeah.
You're not going to be paid a royalty for it.
Okay. Now, the lawyer also says that these were not just drugged out parties where they were making people do things against their will. They were consensual sex orgies. He said no one was too drunk or too high. I don't know how too high is. Like, what's this guy's high but not too high? Listen to his explanation.
Defense against that kind of
So my defense is very well established. I interviewed myself the different men who were being brought sort of into Mr. Combs and this person's intimate situation. I've flown around the country. I've interviewed a large number of them. There's not the slightest inkling, according to the interviews that I've done, of anything that's coercive, non-consensual. Nobody was too drunk. Nobody was too high. These were adults in a relationship. This is a 10-year relationship. We can't forget that. This is a 10-year relationship. And it was adults and consensual, and everybody who was there wanted to be there. So I feel very confident in our position.
I'm very confused. You have a 10-year relationship with multiple men that you have sex parties with. That's a relationship.
And he was fully aware of it, as the lawyer was. He was fully aware and brought into the situation as they would come into these parties.
He says that's what they're going to say if he presents his case. Okay, we'll watch for that. Also, he says there were not multiple victims. There was just one victim named in the indictment. Again, we should remember the prosecutor, Damian Williams, says we're not done here. This is just our opening salvo. So, okay, let's listen to him say only one victim.
This is all just about that one relationship. But when you read through the indictment, they say that there's not just one victim. They say there's multiple victims here today. And what I heard described was they said they have 50 witnesses or victims.
Yeah, I think it's 49 witnesses and one victim. I think if you broke it down, and I say that because count 2, which is the sex trafficking count, has victim number 1, and there is no victim number 2 anywhere in the indictment.
So you're saying that there are not other women, because what they were essentially arguing here is that he coerced and forced women into sex acts by using physical force, financial pressure, emotional abuse, and narcotics for what they described as these freak-off sessions. They're saying that he self-described them as that.
Yeah, there's one victim in the indictment. The charging document.
One victim does count, right?
No, of course, but I'm just not. It's not 50. I mean, what they did, it's a little too cute, is it's 50 witnesses or victims. Well, it's one victim. That's all that's in the indictment.
Okay, Digital Bridge says, does this mean he's gay? I mean, I don't know exactly what this means about putting his sexuality into any box, because he had multiple men he was having sex orgies with.
Yeah, and if there's children, then it's beyond being gay. It's being,
Yeah, I guess I took it as that the multiple men were all partaking with like a female involved. I guess that was my understanding. But
I think that there was various
I was not invited, and I would have
combinations.
Probably not
That's
so politely
good. I'm glad to know that.
Yes.
Okay. No one on Redacted has ever attended a Diddy event.
No.
So yeah. Okay. And then finally, the lawyer is saying they're going to fight this. They're going to take this all the way through trial. They will not take a plea.
Thanks.
Is there any chance Sean Combs takes a plea deal?
I don't see it happening. I do not see it happening. He's innocent. I believe he's innocent. I believe he's innocent of the charges. And he is going to go to trial, and I believe he's going to win.
Mark Agnifilo, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Going to trial. So how many more people will be named?
I mean,
they don't want him to go to trial.
Is it a trial like Ghislaine Maxwell trial?
They do
is
not
it a trial
want him
like
to go
the
to
trial we were going to get over Epstein and never got? Will we get a trial?
We will not go to trial.
Okay, that's Clayton's prediction.
I can't believe it. There's too many people would be named if they go to trial. There's no way. And yes, would they keep it without cameras like they did with Ghislaine Maxwell if they did go to trial? Mm-hmm. You weren't, court reporters were not. I mean, I don't see them going to trial.
Yeah.
But maybe they will.
Okay.
Maybe they see like, hey, what happened to Johnny Depp? Right? Maybe, Johnny Depp was vindicated after that craziness with Amanda Heard, right? That was all on television.
Yeah.
Everyone got to see how crazy she was. Maybe.
Oh, God. I don't want a court TV type drama.
Amber Heard? Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, you've heard it. That's what we know, and that's what you know.